right, well, good morning. So nice to join you all. I think we're going to take about 10 minutes and just do some dad jokes. Anybody got a good one? All right, no, just kidding. Actually, I do appreciate a good dad joke. So, but we won't. We're going to jump into God's word here. I hope that those announcements didn't feel like a commercial break in the midst of that, because I really want you guys to capture too. Like that's an act of worship. When we give and when we get to share ourselves with other people, and when we get to participate in things like the Kids Blitz and even the thing we did in the park on Friday night, those are wonderful opportunities. And so I am really, really excited. I mean, Betsy said it. Our fiscal year ends at the end of the summer, and we're coming in so strong. Your giving's been so fantastic that we are poised and ready here. The next several weeks, we're going to be pulling the trigger on some really cool opportunities. The missions committee and the local outreach group, they've been compiling some stuff, and we're going to really be able to bless and do some really cool things that I'm excited to tell you about. So once we kind of get those things lined up and ready to go, start pulling the trigger on them, I'm gonna share those with you, and it'll be fun. I'm excited about what God is doing this summer. For now, open your Bible to Genesis chapter 37. So our title this morning is called is Despised Yet Delivered. This is one of my favorite stories in the Bible. Because when you think about hardships in the Bible, you tend to, most of the time, I tend to run to Job right out of the gate, right? Because Job is an extreme study. And if I'm honest, I don't know that I really connect all that well with Job. There's a lot of really amazing principles that we can pull from there, but it's hard sometimes because, like, he loses a ton, and then he loses a ton more, and then he basically loses it all, and I don't know that there's many of us, if any of us, that can fully relate to that, right? I mean, it's hard to go, yeah, I know what it means to lose everything and then have everything restored back, and that's tough. Now, Joseph, on the other hand, who we're going to talk about today, this guy's right up my alley, because he gets thrown into a pit by some obnoxious brothers. Well, if you've got brothers, right out of the gate, you're like, yep, that makes sense. And then he pulls himself together and starts making something of himself, and something bad happens, and then he pulls himself together, and something bad happens again, and it's just like this roller coaster of every time I start picking myself up from getting knocked down from the wave, another wave hits me, and that I can feel like I can relate with. Like I feel like that's the way life works sometimes. And so his story is very full of emotion and humanity, and I love that. I would encourage you, read it this week. It's Genesis 35 through about 45, 46, 47 in there. You can go read it, and read it through that lens of putting yourself in his shoes, because I'm not going to read all that today. If I did 12 chapters, and then I'd have to talk about them all, and we'd be here till Thursday. So I'm going to count on you to go do a little bit of stuff on your own. But what I want to do here, I was studying this week, and this really jumped out at me, and it kind of caught me off guard. I want to share it with you. It's a really rough timeline of the life of Joseph, but I wanted you to see something, especially in light of Father's Day. And so this is always a time where we talk about you parents and we talk about you dads. And so I think this is pretty cool. So here's what happens. He gets his coat of many colors, and his brothers hate him for it. He has this dream about the sheaves and tells his brothers, and they hate him even more. And then he has the dream about the heavens, and they get jealous. And he gets thrown in the pit. And Dad gets tricked by the goat blood. We'll read that in a second. Potiphar's wife, she tricks him. He gets thrown into prison. He gets forgotten by the cupbearer for 2 years. And then, like the end of it, so here's a fast forward to the end. For the reconciliation here, they're going to reconcile, and everything's going to be okay, and everything's good. And this is where the humanity, I think, I love in it, because it's not just, and Joseph does everything perfectly. Like, he has this moment where there's a little bit of, I don't want to say getting revenge, but he has his moments where he gets back at him a little bit, because they come in, they're starving, there's a huge famine, he has grain, and he gives them grain, and they don't know that it's Joseph, so he gives them grain, and he sends them on their way, but he tells the guys, hey, put some of my personal stuff in their bags. And so then they get stopped down the road, and they're like, oh, you stole this, and they're like, no, we didn't, and they're mortified. And so it's almost like he's like, ha, gotcha. And then he does it again. Ha ha, got you again. And so like there's a little part of me that's like, you're a little bit of a stinker, aren't you? Like, you're not even really doing this the right way, Joseph. But then they all make up and there's hugs and kisses and everything's great. It's fantastic. So look at that for a second. This is his father. So if you back up a few chapters, this is his father. This is Jacob. So Jacob's story, he tricks his dad to get his brother's birthright, right? So he burns his brother in the process, and his brother hates him for it. Then he gets tricked by Laban, who is the dad of who he marries. He gets tricked by Laban. He shows favoritism to Rachel, and because of that, he hates Leah. He plays a trick on Laban with the sheep. You have to go read that story. That's pretty cool. Rachel steals a bunch of stuff from Laban, and so Joseph has to play a trick on Laban to get out of there. And then ultimately, he's reconciled with his brother in the end. So if I go back, look at some of the words that have underlined there. The hatred, the tricks, go forward, go the tricking, the hating. I say that to say Joseph and his brothers, like they learned some of this stuff honestly, didn't they? Like I think they learned some stuff by watching their dad and their mom. Like there's quite a bit of sneakiness going on, quite a bit of tricking each other. They probably learned how to do it. We learn who we love and who we hate by watching our parents. And so I would say this to you. There's so much of who you are you learn from your parents, good and bad. Man, you grab hold of the good and you acknowledge the bad and do something about it. And so you end up, generationally, we end up doing the same thing over and over again unless we make a generational change and really make a change to go, I'm not going to do this way. And so you learn to love and you learn to hate who your parents loved and hated. And so this is true of all of us. You don't have to be a parent for this. You're going to pass down your stuff to somebody. And so that's your challenge today. Hey, dads, you lead the charge in that, right? Like, hey, let's pass down some good stuff. And maybe at some point, maybe some of you need to have a conversation with your kids and go, hey, can I tell you some of the bad stuff that I struggle with that I don't want you to struggle with? Like, I struggle with jealousy. I struggle with anxiety. I struggle with whatever it may be. Have those conversations. We don't like to have those conversations because we don't want to acknowledge we got cracks in our pod. But that's how you break some of that generational stuff. You go, hey, listen, this is what I struggle with, and I don't want to pass this on to you. I don't want to hate people, and you hate people too. That's good, honest conversations. That's a freebie. Let's jump in here. Genesis chapter 37. Starting with verse 3, let's read this together, and we'll try to read it quick because I'm going to read most of the chapter here. Now Israel, that's Jacob loved Joseph more than any other of his sons because he was the son of his old age. Okay, so if I go back to that screen, he showed favoritism to Rachel and hated Leah, and that didn't work out good for him. And so here he is doing it again. He's showing favoritism to his youngest son, and it's not going to work out well. It's going to go bad. Spoiler alert, it goes real bad. So he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all of his brothers, they hated him. They hated Joseph, and they couldn't speak peacefully to him. Now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we are binding sheaves in the field. And behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." And so his brothers said to him, "Are you going to reign over us? Or are you going to rule over us?" So they hated him even more. Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers. "Behold, I have dreamed another dream. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." But when he told it to his father and his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers bow down ourselves to the ground before you?" And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept this saying in mind. Skip forward to verse 17. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. So his dad sends him out, "Go check on your brothers. They're out in the field working." So they saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes the dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what becomes of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life. And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him." He said that so that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. And the pit was empty. There was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat. That's cold-blooded right there. They're going to throw him in a pit and then go have dinner. That's harsh. And looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing gum and balm and myrrh on their way to carry it to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers listened to him. And they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes and returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone, and where shall I go?" Then they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in blood. And they sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, "This we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's robe or not." And he identified it and said, "It is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him." And Joseph is without a doubt torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his sons for many days. Man, that's a rough story. What does it mean to be despised? So it's clear here in this passage. We see it several times here. There's some words that we would use for it. Being hated is a word that we would use. Being disliked. A couple years ago, we got real big into the word canceled, right? You got canceled. If I didn't like what you did, you got canceled. And so we canceled some people and some things. And if you're big on social media, maybe being despised is being unfriended or blocked or something like that. None of those things are good. We don't tend to like those things. They leave us feeling with a sense of hopelessness and sometimes isolation. And so we'll talk about that here in just a second. But before we dig into that, let's maybe pause and look in the mirror just a little bit, because I think there's plenty of times that we earn it honestly. We bring that hatred down on ourselves from other people. And so let's start with Joseph. And I want to have a little fun here because Scripture doesn't give us his motivation. So please hear that clearly. I'm going to question his motives here, and that's not in the passage. But humor me for a second. I know from verse 2 that he's 17 years old. I also know that a 17-year-old back then is not the same thing as a 17-year-old today, right? But I also know 17 is still 17. And boys will be boys. I'm almost 50 years old, and sometimes I act like a 17-year-old. So it doesn't really change all that much. And there's a part of me that wants to go to Joseph in this and be like, maybe don't wear the coat of many colors around your brothers. Like, it's kind of a bad idea. They already know you're the favorite, right? You can see him sitting there at Christmas, and he pulls out the coat of many colors, and they got socks and underwear. And it's like, man, come on. So maybe don't wear that when you go out to the field to find them. Maybe get a hoodie or a cardigan from somebody or something. Don't wear that and provoke them in the midst of that. And I think it's really amazing that God gives you these like intense, specific dreams about your brothers, but maybe don't share it with them. Especially when they're bowing down to you. Maybe tell it to a friend or a pastor, or maybe run it by mom. And Mom, what do you think? Like, I had this dream. Maybe you shouldn't tell your brother that. I've got a brother, and I will tell you, we got in fist fights for far less than this right here. And so I know from experience, if you keep poking that bear, it's going to throw you in a pit, and it's not a good thing. If I had $1 for every time growing up that I wanted to sell my brother on eBay, and we didn't have eBay back then, it would have been fantastic. I'd be a rich man if we did that. But on a serious note, he may have been completely justified in wearing the coat. And obviously God was working something and had a plan. But there's a caution here for us to be mindful of how we treat other people. So for starters, don't hate other people. Don't do that to people. Look at what, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever you sow, you're going to reap. For the one who sows to his own flesh will reap from the flesh corruption. But the one who sows to the Spirit, from the Spirit, reap eternal life. Let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we will reap if we don't give up. Like, there's a caution here to be careful what you're sowing. Don't provoke people to hatred. Don't hate them, and don't provoke them to hatred. Don't go wearing the coat of many colors around them when you know it's just going to make them mad. Now, again, I'm reading into a motivation here that's not there, but I think you understand what I'm saying. Like, I think there's times that we tend to provoke and poke when there's no need to. There's no reason to do that. I was thinking just this morning about my life growing up with my brother, and how many times in life we would, I don't know, just if you've got a sibling, you know this feeling of I can say something or do something to him, and I know exactly which buttons to push that I'm going to get it. If you're a spouse, you know the feeling. And so I think that's part of this caution, is just to pause and go, hey, am I pushing buttons in somebody just to make them dislike me that much more? Because we don't typically need to do that to be hated, right? In fact, most of the time it can be given by other people just on its own. Like, people are good at hating you for just no reason. Like, this world is full of it. It's amazing. You watch the news for 10 minutes and you'll find out we hate all kinds of things. And this person hates that person, and they hate each other back. And the world is full of people being despised and despising one another for different reasons. Like, for Joseph, his brothers were clearly jealous of him, without a doubt. It even says it right there. Potiphar's wife, if you keep reading, you'll see Potiphar. She was trying to seduce Joseph, and she was trying to get something from him. She was greedy. She wanted him. And because of that, he gets thrown in jail. Even the cupbearer in jail, he wanted something from Joseph. He gets it from Joseph, and then makes these big promises that I'm going to take care of you, and don't worry about it. I'm going to help get you out of here. And then he leaves and forgets all about him. And so there's some selfishness there. So we have these things that drive us: jealousy, greed, selfishness, that drive us to it's not hard to be hated by other people. And then I think there's just times that it's just this world that we live in. You can be hated for no reason at all. You can be hated because someone looks at you and they're like, I don't like how you're at peace in life. I'm jealous of that. I don't like you because you have joy in your life and I don't. It's the misery loves company, so I'm going to dislike you for that reason. Look what Isaiah says about Jesus. It says that he was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, as one from whom men hid their faces. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. And so just mankind, us, ourselves, we tend to do that to him. We despise Jesus just for who he is, and he's done nothing wrong. Because ultimately, when you boil it down, evil hates the truth. Right? And from our very beginning, our very inception, our hearts are evil. They're wicked. And we hate the truth. I don't like hearing the truth. And it takes a work of God in us to overcome that. Whatever the case may be, it's not fair. I can say that without a doubt. If you think about it for just a moment, is it fair for them to throw Joseph in a pit and want to kill him? Like, the punishment doesn't really fit the crime there. Like, that feels harsh. Like, I don't know, take his coat and hide it and beat him up. Like, that feels better. Like, that feels more brotherly than I'm going to throw you in a pit and kill you. Like, I feel like it escalated quickly, right? And it got to a bad spot. And if I'm being honest, given the option between being killed and being sold in slavery, I almost think I'd rather you kill me, right? Because I don't know what this guy's going to do to me when he buys me. Is he going to torture me? Is he going to beat me? Is he going to make me work his fields like crazy? I don't really want to go do that. I'd almost rather you kill me. So that's not fair. And then I finally get myself together, and I'm confronted by this woman a married woman who's trying to seduce me, and I say no, and I get away, and I get thrown in jail because I'm innocent. That's not fair. And then I'm working with this cupbearer, and I'm helping him, and I help him get himself out of prison, and he promises I'm going to remember you, and he doesn't. That's unfair. And it's unfair when my spouse treats me that way. And it's unfair when my friend dishonors me that way. And it's unfair when my boss asks those things of me. And it's unfair when they say those things to me. And the list can go on and on and on and on and on. And we all can resonate with that. Like, whatever the case is, it's not fair. It's not fun to be despised. It's not fun to be disliked. It's not fun to be unfriended and canceled. Those things aren't fun. Those things leave me in a pit. It's a pit of feeling alone and isolated and unworthy and helpless and hopeless. And I question myself and my ability just to even function as a human being when I'm hated. Picture Joseph for just a second sitting in that pit. He's got to be wondering, why would my brothers be doing something like this to me? Like, what did I say? Like, I know I said some things, and I know they don't like me, but to throw me in a pit to kill me? Like, I imagine maybe he could hear them having dinner and talking about it. They're talking about how they're going to kill him and how they're going to cover it up, and they got this plan. That's got to be terrifying. They're sitting there, and he's talking about him, and he's sitting in there, and there's nothing he can do. It's terrible being in that pit. It's terrible being in the pit of loneliness when someone you think should be kind to you is unkind to you and despises you. And at any given point, if you follow this narrative here, at any given point in Joseph's life, if he would have given up, you'd have been like, I understand. You've been through a lot, man. Like, I get it. They're going to kill you. Yeah, man, just kill me. Just go ahead and kill me. Don't sell me to a slaver. Please don't do that. Just go ahead and kill me. I would much rather you do that. See, sometimes I think our pot that we have gets a chip knocked out of it, and then somehow we manage to kind of put it back together and hold it together. You know, a couple weeks ago we did that. We dropped the pot and it broke all over, and it's like, oh yeah, I understand. That's what life feels like when I go through storms. But that's only kind of part of it, though, right? Because sometimes our pot gets broken and a chunk gets knocked out of it, and we put it back together, and then 10 minutes later it gets knocked over again and it gets broken again. We put that piece back on, and then somebody else comes along and knocks it off again, and it gets broke again. And so our life goes through these cycles of just, and we get to a spot. Some of you have been in this spot where you make the statement, at least in your head, or maybe you make it out loud. You go, Lord, I don't know that I can take anymore. I just don't know that I can do this. This feels like it's just way too much for me. And so I think Joseph would be that person. And so there's clearly this test of his character going on. God is refining and building up inside of him something different that's only going to be accomplished in that way. That's the cool thing for us as we get to see this story, right? Because we can flip forward a few pages and see the end of it and see what happens here. Because there's this thing that happens if Joseph doesn't go through all of this. This doesn't happen this way, I don't think. Because and this thing that happens, we'll talk about this more in just a second, but this thing that happens is pretty fantastic. But look at what he has to go through to get there. And so there's a part of this thing that I would say is important for you to hang on to. Like, and when I say hang on to it, I mean hang in there. As you hang on to it, hang in there. What it is that you're going through, like, man, trust God to be building up a character inside of you and to be doing something different with you. Because your faith is the launch pad, right, that will allow you to endure the trials. So I wonder how many times Joseph, as he's sitting in prison, especially, I wonder as he's sitting in prison, by this point it's been years later, he's sitting in prison, and I wonder how he thinks about that moment where he had those dreams that he shared with his brothers. Right? You can be real confident back then, right? Hey guys, just want to let you know, I had this dream, you're all going to bow down to me. All right, I'll see you when it happens. Now, fast forward, I'm not even in the same country as my brothers. And they think I'm dead. I'm probably never going to see them again. I don't think I'm ever getting out of this prison. The guy said he was going to help me, and it's been almost 2 years, and nothing's happening. I wonder if he's thinking back on that moment, those moments. Like, I'm sure that confidence is not there. But there's a part of the faith. Like, Joseph, do you believe God was serious when he gave you that dream? Do you believe God was serious when he made those promises to you? Do you trust him in the midst of that? I love this verse. This should be an encouragement to us. Therefore, since you are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside the weight and the sin that clings so closely to us and weighs us down, slows us down. And let us run with endurance, there it is, the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and seated at the right hand of the throne of God. That should be an encouragement to you. Should also be a challenge to you. It's a challenge because there are people watching you. Every one of you. People on this earth, you mean? Yeah, people on this earth. Like, I watch, and you watch, and you want to see how I'm handling the thing that I'm going through, and I want to see how you're handling it. Like, we watch. But also, I mean, there's a sense of, there's a cloud of witnesses above us. I don't really know what that means, if I'm being honest. I could make some guesses. I know for sure God's watching us. But there's a cloud. I'd like to think my grandfather's up there watching me. I'd like to think my dad's watching me. And he's going, all right, man, good job. You did okay with that one. I'd like to think that. But I know there's something there. I ought to be challenged by that. You ought to be challenged by the fact that the way you handle the trials in your life and the way you run the race, it should be the way Jesus did, who endured the cross, who endured the beatings, who endured the hatred. People hated him enough to put him on a cross. And why? For what reason? So that he could sit at the right hand of the Father. And for you and I, what does that mean for us? It means we're sons and daughters of the Most High. Like, there's a glory to be found in that, in eternity. And we're not as fortunate as I mean, it would be nice if we could go and see the end of the story in our life. Like, whatever it is, a trial that you're going through right now, that person that's despising you, I wish I could just fast forward a few chapters for you and go, hey, here's what it's going to look like. It'll be okay. Don't worry about it. And you go, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. Somebody made this statement to me one time. They're like, what if the greatest fruit in your life, ooh, I like that. Yeah, okay. Tell me about it. What if the greatest fruit in your life came from the greatest pain in your life? Wow. Okay, that's hard. I like the greatest fruit part. Can I get that DoorDash to me? Make it easy? No. What if the greatest fruit? What if it built up a character inside of you? What if God did something inside of you where you saw a character in you, or you saw a deeper character of him, and it produced this incredible fruit, and it had to be done through this trial? What if it looked like that? So what does it look like to be delivered? All right, so if I fast forward to Genesis chapter 41, don't turn there. But if you go, you're going to see what happens to Joseph. 2 years after the cupbearer, he interprets a dream for Pharaoh. And through a series of events here, next thing you know, he's the number 2 guy pretty much in all of Egypt. He is running the show in Egypt. And so he ascends to power quite quickly and is able to, okay, there's going to be a famine. We're going to stockpile some stuff. Everything's going to be okay. So Pharaoh's loving him. He's the number 2 guy in charge. And I think pretty quickly we can look at that and go, he's delivered. That's success. That's what success looks like. Because we run really quickly in our mind to money and power as the markers of success. And there's no doubt God made him successful in that way. But I think what success looks like to us sometimes is very different than what it looks like to God. Like, I think there's times that God wants to do something way bigger, way more meaningful, way deeper than just, oh, your bank account got full and now you're in charge of things. It's about words like reconciliation, being reconciled to someone or something that was broken is being fixed and repaired. It's restoration. It's mercy. It's peace. It's things showing up like that God looks at and goes, man, that's incredible. It's ultimately, it's trust. I mean, trust is where we find the fertile soil in our life for character and restoration and deliverance. Do you want deliverance from whatever it is that is despising you? Trust God. Trust Him. Trust Him to restore and trust Him to bring it about to fullness. Trust Him that it may not look exactly the way you expect it to look, but it's exactly the way He designed it. Trust Him that it may not happen in the exact time frame that you want it to happen, but it's exactly happening when He wants it to happen. That's trust. Joseph believed that his brothers would bow down to him, but I imagine he never had an idea of what that context looked like. And so when it happened, he had every opportunity to turn that to evil. They bowed down to him, and he had every chance to go, yeah, you're dismissed, get out of here. I don't want anything to do with you. Ha ha, told you. Should have never thrown me in that pit. And he didn't do that. In fact, just the opposite happens. When he sees them, they don't recognize him. He recognizes them, and he has to go and hide himself because he's weeping, because he's so broken over what can happen here in this moment. God has brought it full circle for him. Man, that's trust that God is going to bring that thing to fruition in a way that we probably would have never seen. The second thing is forgiveness. Oh my goodness. I could spend 6 weeks talking to you about trust. I could spend 6 weeks, I could spend 100 weeks talking to you about forgiveness. I wonder if Joseph would have ever even found forgiveness had he not gone through all these other hardships in his life. You know, I think there's times that we hold on to these really deep, hurtful things and deep grudges, and so I think sometimes God allows us to go through other trials so that we don't get so fixated on this one that we can begin to distance ourselves from it a little bit and look at it and go, hey, I need to reconcile this. I need to see some restoration happening here. And so there's no question that there's hurts and pains in our life. Luke chapter 7, this really neat instance happens with Jesus and this Pharisee. He goes to visit this Pharisee, and I think the Pharisee is he's wanting to posture a little bit, and okay, Jesus was in my house and he's hanging out in my house, and so while he's there, there's this woman there that's serving Jesus and waiting on Jesus, and she's doting on him, she's caring for him like crazy. And so this Pharisee makes the statement. He says, look, she's basically, hey, she's trash. And if you knew who she was and what she's done, you wouldn't even let her touch you or come near you. And so Jesus makes this statement back to him. He says, hey, listen, religious guy, I tell you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven. For she loved much. But he who is forgiven little loves little. Man, Joseph's in that spot. The sins, like you throwing me in jail and not throwing me in a pit, me being thrown in a jail, the sins are vast. I've been hated by a lot. And I can love a lot because I can give forgiveness. See, I think that's where love starts for us. If you want to love this world, start to forgive this world. If you want to love other people, start by forgiving them. And that's not instant reconciliation. That's you letting go and saying, God, I'm putting this in your hands, and I'm not going to hold them accountable for this anymore. That's Joseph. I imagine him standing maybe on a stage somewhere. He's up, right? Because he's the number 2 guy in Egypt. He's standing up there, and these guys come in, or maybe he's seated in his chair, and here's his opportunity. Here's the chance. And he's like, I have forgiven them. I'm not holding you accountable for what you did to me. Well, wow. Why is that? Because I see where God has brought me, and I would never be here today had that not even happened. So I can't even, I forgive you. Now think about this for just a second. So this moment happens, and because this isn't just about power and money and success, this is about the nation of Israel is here now, and they're about to be wiped out because there's a famine, and they need help. And so the lineage of Jesus is hanging here in this moment. Joseph is a key cog in this moment, because the lineage of Jesus, if Joseph goes, nope, see you later, the story's different, isn't it? Maybe even for us. He's a key cog here. Hey, guess what? You're a key cog. You matter. You're important. Your light that you shine for people is important. And you may not realize that. If Joseph doesn't give them what they need and then ultimately bring them in and care for them, I don't know what happens to the nation of Israel. I'm sure God, but you see my point? And so there's a part of this that if you want to be made new, if you want newness to happen inside of you, and if you want newness to happen inside of your community, and you want newness to happen inside of your home, you need to start trusting God. You need to start forgiving other people. And you need to start allowing Him to work through you and let His light shine through you. Because there's a time that my pot, my life, it's got its cracks and its bumps and its bruises in it, and people despise that. And they look at it and they're, shame on you, shame on your pot, and shame on how awful that is, and that's awful, and ha, 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 I'm making fun of it. And so I cover my pot and I hide it because I don't want anybody to know my brokenness. And they despise me because of that. And had Joseph done that, trouble would have happened. But there's this part of that if I don't hide that, it may very well be that someone else's darkness in their life, they need the light shining through me to help find their way. Does that make sense? Let me bring it to you in a kindergarten kind of way. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Yeah, I don't know, man, that's ugly. Like you're a mess. You're broken. I don't like you. So I should hide it under a bushel. No, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine.